So now we're thinking about the blood vessels and the blood supply to the dermis. And as normal, we've got the epidermis on top and we've got the dermis below. Now actually, quite a lot of the blood vessels go straight through the muscle fascia. A lot of the blood vessels come from deeper muscles, go straight through the fascia, the sheaths around the muscles, directly into the dermis. So you've got blood vessels coming from deep structures. And actually, there's two main groups of blood vessels in the dermis. We've got deeper ones. So here's a deeper collection of blood vessels. Some actually run in the hypodermis. So we've got fairly deep groups of blood vessels. They're called a plexus. So this would be the deep dermal plexus. And there's actually more superficial blood vessels high up going into beds of capillaries. Sort of like this, going into beds of capillaries. So there's a deeper plexus of larger vessels and there's a more superficial plexus of smaller vessels. But what I want to do really is show you how they're working. So here we have a blood vessel here, and it branches off into a group of capillaries. And that branches off into an arteriole. So this arteriole is taking blood into a group of capillaries. In fact, here we have a group of capillaries supplied by blood from this arteriole. And of course this is going to drain again in a venule. But this blood vessel that the capillary derive from carries on. So here's this blood vessel carrying on. Now the reason this arrangement is important is just before the capillaries here there is a sphincter. A sphincter, you remember, is a ring of muscle. There is a sphincter around about the arteriole, and it is the sphincter before the capillaries. So it's the pre-capillary sphincter. And there are untold millions of capillaries in the dermis. In fact, underneath your fingernails you can see the capillaries. In fact, this is the basis of the test, the clinical test called the capillary refill test. So if you just try it on yourself, if you hold your hand up now and press your fingernail till the beds go white, and you're supposed to hold your hand up and press that hard for 4 seconds, then you look at it and it should go pink again in less than 2 seconds. That would be a normal capillary refill time. If it was more than 2 seconds, that would be a prolonged capillary refill time, which you should explain because it could well be abnormal. So we've got all these capillaries here, and we've got a pre-capillary sphincter. Now, this is so important because it's a mechanism of thermoregulation. So if the body gets too hot, we need the pre-capillary sphincters to dilate. We need peripheral vasodilation. And I think you can see if this capillary dilates, it gets wider, that's going to allow more blood to go into these capillary beds. That's why when you're too hot, you can go a reddy colour, because your pre-capillary sphincters are going to dilate, they're going to relax, letting more blood into the superficial capillaries, and you go a reddish colour. And that's good because it means excess heat can be lost from the surface of the body. But conversely, if you're too cold, the pre-capillary sphincter will constrict, the muscle will contract, and you'll get what's called peripheral vasoconstriction. That will close that down. That means that much less blood will be going into the superficial capillaries, so you'll go a paler colour and the skin will feel cooler as well. But this works because there's these vessels here joining the, so this would be an arterial vessel here bringing blood in, and this would be a venous vessel here taking the blood away. Now, this is what you call an anastomosis vessel. It's a arteriovenous anastomotic vessel. It's an anastomosis, or a communication between an arterial vessel and a venous vessel. And what it actually works as, it's called a shunt vessel. It's called a shunt vessel. So it's an anastomotic vessel, but a shunt vessel describes its function, really. Because if you think about it, when the pre-capillary sphincter dilates and there's more blood going through there, then that can constrict, so there's less blood going through there. So when that closes off and that dilates, you're going to get more blood going through there. But conversely, if you're too cold and you get pre-capillary sphincter vasoconstriction, that means you're going to get less blood going through the superficial capillaries. That means at the same time the shunt vessel has to dilate to let more blood through the shunt vessel. And if you're too cold, that's good. So when you're too cold, that constricts, less blood goes to the surface of the body, so less heat is lost. But at the same time as that's constricted, the shunt vessel, the anastomotic vessel, will dilate, letting more blood go through without going near the surface of the body, keeping more blood nearer the warmer central core of the body. So that's basically the way it's working. You've got a deeper plexus and you've got a more superficial plexus. You've got arterial vessels, venous vessels, anastomotic vessels, which are shunt vessels, an arteriole, capillary groups. This would be a venule taking blood from the capillary back into the venous circulation. So very important for thermoregulation. And of course it's supplying oxygen. The oxygen is going to diffuse out of the capillaries into the tissue fluids of the dermis. And we have already noted in the section on the epidermis, this is particularly important because the epidermis receives its oxygen supply from the tissue fluids of the dermis. And also nutrients like glucose and amino acids are going to be transported through the wall of the capillary to nourish the dermis. And likewise the waste products, carbon dioxide for example, are going to diffuse back from the metabolizing tissue of the dermis back into the capillaries, where it can be taken away in the venous circulation and exhaled in the lungs. So that is the blood supply of the dermis.